because this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Come on, this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. I know we should always help we neighbor, especially in time of a natural disaster. But this is not the case with Guatemala because the poor people will never see a dollar. Only a few rich man will start to get rich. Like a letter because Mr. Politician, we got to change the plans. God have mercy. Mr. Politician, we got to change the plans. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. This a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Not an inch, not a foot, not a centimeter. We never give up to Guatemala because look what them do to the people of my color. If them speak too loud, sure to get murder. Look what them do to the Indian Maya. Holy by them massacre. La mismo presidente quiere we agua because this a fi we with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala.
Greetings and morning and welcome to Sunday Review for this morning, Sunday, May 11th, 2025. Recognized at least in some parts of the Western Hemisphere as Mother's Day. I know that the UK that one different time. I think that October for their Mother's Day. So this is where we make sense of the news, Belize's only news review talk show. I am the producer and host, Sister YaYa Marin Coleman. I have a whole set of good troublemakers with me today. Somebody you know, somebody you see for the first time. Co-host, hailing from Trinidad and Tobago, Brother Akko Mutota. Morning, Brother Akko.
Morning, Sister YaYa, and morning to Sister Jacklyn Frank and to Miss Jalima Gold. Welcome to Sunday Review and welcome to our listening audience. Very happy to be here this morning to observe Mother's Day, which is, as Sister Gold said, every day should be Mother's Day, and I agree with that. But because of the commercialization of events like these, we sometimes, the conscious people, have to give perspective. And so it's not so much that we are falling in tradition, but we are trying to give a perspective to an event that so many people around the world observe. And so we need to give our input and give direction. So good to see you all, and we are happy to have you on this important occasion.
Respect. Sister Penny Cassasola should be joining us, but it seems like they have some internet issues. So, Sister Penny, if we only could get your audio, we'll put up your picture, but we definitely want your vibration in this conversation. So, Sister Penny Cassasola is our elder, original Ubatter, leading lactation consultant in Belize and around the world. Also, we have from Belize, Sister Jalima Gold out of Pacencia Village, President of the Belize Seaweed Farmers Association. Morning, Sister Jalima.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
No stranger.
Morning.
And my good sister from out of Barbuda, one of the claimants from the matter that was taken before the Privy Council in 2023, and they won. Give thanks, both her and Brother John Mussington. We have Sister Jacklyn Frank from Barbuda. Morning, my sister.
Morning, everybody. Morning.
Morning again.
I hope Sister Penny could join me. When Brother Akko did the reading of the Caribbean news, I called Brother Akko. Morning, Sister Sonia, Belizean American Mother's Day of herself. And sending out Mother's Day greeting to mothers who chose to be mothers, mothers who were forced to be mothers, people who are not biological mother, but did a whole lot of mothering, sometimes better than biological mothers. And thank you. We could reflect on African ancestresses who were mothers and did mothering. Give thanks for them and reflect on we journey as mothers. So with that said, Brother Akko, got us strong with your Caribbean report. My good Caribbean correspondent. I don't think you like when I said that, you know, but I still
Good
like
morning again, Sister YaYa, and morning to our guests. So we have a few pieces that we want to share this morning. The first one is out of Jamaica, and the heading is Militarism or Democracy, Where is Jamaica Heading? And this was written by Dr. Maziki Thame, a political scientist out of UE, Mona, Jamaica, and it was carried in Jamaican and Guyanese publication. Dr. Thame stated, the government has been expanding the role of the army in policing, militarizing police practices, and passing or attempting to pass draconian legislation for sentencing related to crimes such as the expansion of mandatory sentences, including harsh sentencing for children. Dr. Thiem also states that militarism goes hand in hand with authoritarianism. While democratic values include popular participation in decision making, it also includes checks on the power of the government and the protection of people's rights and freedoms. Militarism threatens democracy by expanding the power of the security forces, use violence against the people, and curtail their means of participating in public life and enjoy rights and freedom. Dr. Thiem continued, in our hemisphere, we are witnessing the rise of militarism and authoritarianism, best expressed in El Salvador, supposedly to curb crime under Nayib Bukele. Nayib Bukele enacted an SOE, a state of exception, in 2022 that limits constitutional protections and grants unlimited powers to the armed forces to arrest suspected gang members and to target human rights advocates. And that is Dr. Thames' perspective on the idea of militarism in the Caribbean. In a subsequent statement, the Jamaican Prime Minister responded that those who are talking about militarism of the country is talking nonsense. So that was his response. And so we move on to the next piece of news, which is out of Trinidad. Okay, so this news follows in the perspective of Dr. Thiem, and it says that the U.S. Navy Admiral Alvin Halsey, commander of the U.S. Southern Command, will travel to Trinidad and Tobago as part of a two-day visit to conduct engagements with government and defense officials. This marks Admiral Halsey's second visit to Trinidad and Tobago as a Southcom commander. Last December, he attended the Caribbean Nation Security Conference. His return reinforces the strong, enduring partnership between the United States and Trinidad. The Admiral will meet with officials and Chief of Defense Staff Daryl Daniel. Additionally, Admiral Halsey will attend the closing ceremony for a military exercise called Trade Winds 2025. And this happened just a few days ago in Trinidad. And so here it is, Dr. Thiem just wrote about this idea of militarism. And here we see in Trinidad active military maneuvers taking place. And the article continues, the 12-day military training program known as Trade Wings exercises ended yesterday with U.S. Admiral Alvin Halsey, the commander of the U.S. Southern Command, instilling the importance of such exercises. Trade Winds is a series of military training operations sponsored by the U.S. Southern Command, which seeks to promote greater collaboration while enhancing the operational capacities of regional militaries. This year's exercise ran from April 26th to May 8th and is the 40th edition of this exercise. And so this is very, very important, as one elder said some time ago, when the U.S. sends its military, is not to pick breadfruit. So we understand very clearly what Dr. Thiem saw while she wrote that piece in Jamaica. It is a pattern throughout the Caribbean. The next piece of news is from Haiti, and this comes from a press release by the Haiti Action Committee. The subtitle, "The Women of Haiti Said It Clearly, We Are Being Exterminated." The Haiti Action Committee called an emergency meeting yesterday, right, to discuss the upcoming protest on Tuesday, May 20th, which is part of international actions commemorating Haitian Flag Day. These international actions also mark the 200th anniversary of the French government's violent extraction of the debt from the Haitian people for their independence. All across Haiti and the world, people are demanding restitution and reparations now for the Haitian people, amplifying the campaign initiated by President Aristide before the US, French, and Canadian sponsored second coup, which forced him out of office in 2004. Today in Haiti, there's a slow motion genocide in progress. Paramilitary death squads funded by the Haitian elite and equipped with US-made weapons are running rampant, carrying out massacres, systemic rapes, and other crimes against humanity. 1 million people have been internally displaced, and more than half of the population is suffering from acute hunger. Now, the Trump administration plans to deport 500,000 Haitian immigrants back to this situation by the end of this summer. The Haitian people are courageously confronting these conditions, continue to organize and resist at the grassroots level. They and we need your solidarity more than ever. Next piece is from Cuba, and we all know the kind of struggles the Cuban people have been waging. The headline is Russia promises to invest 1 billion in Cuba by 2030. Russia said its businesses, and this is from Granma, the Cuban paper, Russia said its businesses will invest more than 1 billion in Cuba by 2030. Cuba's president, he said Thursday, promising a lifeline for the Caribbean island amid a grueling economic crisis. Russia had previously announced the so-called Plan 2030 with Cuba, but for the first time put a price tag on a range of proposals to invest in key areas, including electricity production, agriculture, and public lighting. This investment will be significant for the Cuban people who have been long suffering under the US embargo. And the last piece of news is from Guyana. We read last week, I think, the protests in Guyana resulting from the death of a young child under questionable circumstances. And there was some serious, what they call riots in Guyana because of the poor handling of this situation by the state and the security forces. So the most recent news is from the Guyana Ministry of Home Affairs. The headline is Canadian expert joins probe into death of Guyanese girl. The Guyana Ministry of Home Affairs has announced the appointment of a Canadian investigator to assist with the ongoing probe into the death of 11-year-old Adriana Young. Ms. Young died in questionable circumstances, and the subsequent autopsy left many dissatisfied, causing unrest in Guyana. This move by the Ghana government is to bring some competency and transparency to the case of the late Miss Young. And that is, I believe, the end of the, let me see here. So we have the Haiti piece. So that is the end of it. Yes, that is the end of the news pieces from around the Caribbean. So
Brother
thank you all
Akko.
for listening.
And
thanks for,
I guess we have to think about in the future, Brother Akko, for create space to make we flesh out the news stories. Other than you just reporting it, which is good because generally we wouldn't get that. But we're reason about that some more. Sister Penny's internet is unstable, so I really suck up my teeth because it may matter to me to have one elder like Sister Penny for share this conversation today. So moving forward, we have Sister Jalima Gold and Sister Jackie Frank. I can start off the conversation, and Brother Akko, you jump in anytime as usual. I can ask how you define a mother? Sister Jackie, you go first, then I'm going to Jalima. What's your definition of a mother? Has it evolved over the years? Let's say from a child to the age you're there now, what is a mother?
she's muted. Unmute, Sister Jackie. You are muted. Unmute. You're still muted. Unmute your mic.
She's working on it.
Right.
Is that better?
Yeah,
Can you hear me now? Okay,
yeah, we hear
okay.
you now. Yes.
Thank you. As a child, mom was the person who provided for me, protected me, punished me, and shaped me to an extent. My dad as well. But mom was the one who was, if she wasn't there, there was a big gap. If dad wasn't there, it wasn't such a big gap, although I ended up being close to my dad too. But if mom wasn't there, there's a big gap and you think, where's mom? Where's mom? As I've got older, I tried to be all of those things for my children because I'm the role model, but also I tried to make sure that they had other good women role models, not just me. Not always just family who were blood family, but family who were people who I came across in my life that they're good people to know, and I hung out with them because I liked how they behaved, the way they thought and talked fitted into what I believe. So it made me stronger and made me hold my beliefs stronger. So mom and I've seen dads who fitted in, or male versions of moms too, because it wasn't always that the children mother was there. But to me, moms, when you're little, are the center of your universe. So if they're not there, or there's not someone like that there, it impacts on your life, and sometimes it can make things more challenging for you if there's not a mom or a mom figure in your life. Everybody needs a mother.
Thanks, Sister Jackie. Sister Jalima, same question.
How I would define motherhood as a child and versus now? That's the question. So I was raised in a single parent household with just my mom. So she really was everything for me. We did always have a big, I guess you could say, network of people. My mom, she always was around a lot of other single moms. So there was a network of like a group of single moms that raised a bunch of kids. She was provider, protector, all of those things for me. Like I said, I didn't have, a dad around. When I chose to have kids myself, it was very important for me, because I didn't have that, to try to keep a certain relationship with my child's father. We are not together right now, but I think that being a mother for me, that's a very loaded question. I was thrown into motherhood before I had biological children, so it was a little bit different for me. I think when I was younger, I didn't get much discipline at all, right? My mom was very free-flowing. I don't know what you say, like hippie, this, that, but I didn't get much discipline. So when I was thrown into having kids before I had, my own biological children, I felt like I think I had to instill, I guess, somewhat a little bit more discipline in those kids, because I didn't have that. But growing up a little bit more into my older years, I've realized that being a mother is a lot more about patience and understanding. And I think that I have learned to be a lot more patient in my older years. Being a mother to me also is not just being a mom to my own kids. I find that I'm like auntie to a lot of kids, but like auntie mom kind of, And I do think it's very important to have community. I do have a small community of moms, and we support each other, and they're there for me and my child, in different ways. I think I'm not a single mom, right? I'm sort of a single mom. We had this conversation, but I do co-parent. So, my child's father is around, but for me, there's only certain things that I can instill in my daughter, right? And that she can absorb from me. So I do think it's very important to have other mom figures, other auntie figures that can kind of mother her and give her other perspectives that I can't give her. So I do think also being a mom is just, like being everything, kind of being everything where you need to be.
Thank you, Jalima. Brother Akko, I ask you the question because everybody, home for mama.
So there are a number of things to say, Yaya. We associate motherhood with parenting, but parenting is not, strictly in the domain of motherhood. It is not necessarily biological. You have male parents and you have female parents. I myself grew up in the home of my grandmother, who was the most dominant influence on my life. And so yesterday, I was in my home village celebrating with my mother and my sisters Mother's Day, and I was asked to speak. And my mother is now 94 years. And so I spoke more of the women of the village who impacted me, not just my mother and my aunt, because my grandmother was older. And so the person who really ran the house was my aunt, who taught us everything: how to sit at the table, how to eat with knife and fork, how to carry yourself. And so those were important things that were taught to me as a child. But importantly, in my observation, and I was making that point last night, this was a small village, not more than 300 people, possibly. And most of the men worked in the oil fields, okay? And so in a remote village, you don't have a lot of public transport. The bus comes in like 4 times for the day: the morning, lunchtime, evening, and then in the night. And so the women were the ones who ran the homes. And this thing struck me as a child, and as an adult, it still resonates with me. And the bus would come at 11:30 in the morning to reach to the oil field around noon, midday, which was lunchtime. And you would see these women preparing their, we call it carriers back in the day, it was just little lunch pails. And they will run to the bus, if the bus didn't stop, to stop the bus to make sure that these men got their lunch carriers of food. And what struck me about that was the devotion that these women had to their families. The devotion to ensure that the men were well fed in terms of nutrition. And it's something that I think as men, we forget these things at times. We don't give value to that. And that is something I always reflect on days like these. Do we fully appreciate the small things? You know, things that sometimes you think insignificant, you take for granted. Do we really appreciate these things as men? These contributions that women make. And I say this in the context of the commercialization of all of these days. Even the commercialization of marriages, where if you don't buy a big diamond, it doesn't seem to have any value. We have commercialized everything, right? Because everything in a capitalist society has a monetary or an economic value. And this is one of the reasons I really for years never observed Mother's Day, but as I grew old, I came to understand that, look, it is a day to celebrate our women, to celebrate our mothers, and to celebrate our grandmothers, and that is why I go to the event. So many years I missed it, to be honest with you, because for me, every day was Mother's Day. Why do we want to have this big brouhaha on this particular day? But it's important to give perspective, as I was stating earlier, to these events so that a generation can understand why it's important to observe these days and why motherhood and womanhood must be celebrated. And before I end, I just want to just read one piece, right? It's a very interesting book. And you always say, I have a book that I read from. Yes, I do. And it's a book called the Ushama. And it deals with the philosophy of the Zulu people. Okay? And this is what it says. It says, and it talks about a religious group in South Africa. And it says, the woman holds an important position in the life of the group. She is the custodian of life, the living link between the past and the future. She is the embodiment of all excellence, and the regard shown her is almost indistinguishable from worship. Everything associated with her is sacred and precious beyond price. The teaching is that when a boy is born, a world comes into being, but God himself comes to earth each time a woman is born. And so these things in the song idealistic, but it is the value that they gave to women. That when a boy is born, a world is created. But when a woman is born, God himself comes to earth. And so we have lost these things. And it's the point I was making yesterday. That in my relationships with women, even my romantic relationships, one of the first things I give and require is respect. A lot of people say, oh, love at first sight. I don't believe in that. You can respect somebody. That's where it begins to me. And then it grows from there. And I think in too many instances, we do not respect our women. And consequently, our women do not respect themselves. In the African naming ceremony that we practice in Trinidad, the elder, in performing the ceremony and naming the ceremony, he says to the father, brother, conduct yourself in such a way that all children call you father. And sister, conduct yourself in such a way that all children may call you mother. And so the motherhood and respect is central. In the Kemetic text, it speaks about seek after knowledge and treat her like a mother, for there is nothing so precious. So knowledge and motherhood and spirituality is all connected. And so we need to return to what I call these pre-colonial teachings that we have lost when contextualizing a day like Mother's Day. That is my comment.
Thanks, Brother Akko. As I've said to Brother Akko before, for the majority of the people, human beings, African descendants, racialized as black people, the majority of us don't know our authentic self. We're mentally enslaved. So some people are the first time they hear this and they're like, and the sad part is that a lot of the values that we have, how we identify that with somebody give we. And then give with ma, with pa, and with granny, and with, so many of us don't know ourselves and what's yet not have no desire for know ourselves. So it's all, I find it uplifting when you meet, let's say in a romantic relationship, so even platonic relationships, that you gravitate to an energy, we have one different level of awareness about themselves as African beings. That you could either be more curious or pull back from it as you grow and evolve. So XTV does have a Mother's Day show. This is the second year, they know they have none. So moving forward, the commitment is, even if Brother Akko decided not to be co-host after 2025, and it earn it because the man gave whole life to the cause. But that's the one that make up, so that's how we go. Hey, Sister Fanta. So, Sister Fanta, right, far now, right? That is good troublemaker sister too. And so it's important that we continue to have that kind of conversation. Before we go to break, Mecca asked each one of the sisters how old they were when they begin to have children, how many children they have, and if they wanted children before they started to have children. And I want to get into that conversation too, because I don't have matter, so I don't think I left myself out.
I'll go first.
Go, Jalima.
I always wanted children from when I was young. I do remember always wanting a big family. I didn't I was my mom's only for a very long time, so I know that I always wanted to have like 5 children when I was young. I don't know why that was. I became a mother at 26, and then I had my daughter at 29. So there's, I became a mother because I got kids. I have my extra kids. So I've always been auntie though. I've always been around kids. I've always felt like, and when you say like becoming a mother or mothering, I think there's that, because I've always been that. When I was very young, I used to take care of kids. I used to babysit when I was 13. I was a nanny when I was, 18 to 20 years old. So I've always liked to be around kids. But I got my other kids when I was 26, and I had Madeline when I was 29.
Thank you. And how old is Madeline now?
12.
12, getting ready to go to high school. What about you, Sister Jackie? How old were you when you started to have children, and did you always want to have children?
Hi, I was 23 when I had my first child, and then 31 when I had the second one, because there were problems with conception. I don't know if I ever really wanted children like that, but I knew it was kind of expected, or what women did. So it wasn't, I don't know if it was a conscious, I want, like I say, I want those red shoes, or I want that coat. I don't know if it was like that. But because part of me, I come from a big family. I have 8 siblings, and 6 of them are boys. And Mom being a typical Caribbean woman, to me, at the time, that boys were lifted up more than the girls were. And it was the boys' needs that were met first. And I think that's just tradition based on this little island of Barbuda, and all, like YaYa says, the knowledge that we inherited, the way that it wasn't necessarily African, it was just the way way we were brought up here, and Mum travelled with that knowledge to the UK when we moved up to the UK. So, because people say to me, "Don't you want any more children?" Or and I say no. And the other day I was working, and it was with a group of men. There was me and five guys, five men looking at agriculture on Barbuda. And we got into a conversation, and like a teasing conversation, where they were saying, "Oh, expecting me to do this, then," because I was the woman. And I said, listen, I was raised with six brothers. You're not getting me to do nothing for you. You're big and ugly. Go and do for yourself. So I'm glad I have my girls. I would never, never give them up. And I'm grateful that I have them and the women that have come into our lives and helped me to make them who they are. But I can't honestly say that I wanted children like that. But I'm glad. I'm really grateful for my two girls, because I'm proud of them. They make me proud. They make me proud.
Yes, Sister Penny has joined us.
This is a persevering experience.
Give
Persevering pays off. I'm on my phone rather than my laptop. That's what's giving problems.
Give thanks, Sister Penny. Before we got our break, even though our break time, I want to get Sister Penny in on this. Sister Penny, can you share with us how old you were when you started having children, and did you want to have children?
I planned to have children in my teens. I was always fascinated, and I used to babysit for the neighborhood from I was 10 years old. And I decided at 25 I would have a career and I would have a child. I wasn't thinking of family so much. I was young and stupid, thinking not broad enough. And I didn't discuss it with anybody, because maybe they would have put me right, but that's what I did. But I actually had my first child at 29, almost 30, and my second one at 34.
Okay, good. We're going to come back and stretch talking. I am enjoying the conversation. We're going to take the first break. We have with us this morning Sister Penelope Cassasola from Belize. She's our elder in the circle today. We have Sister Jalima Gold from out of Placencia Village, Stancrick District, Belize. And we have with us Sister Jacklyn Frank from Barbuda, from Barbuda Land Defenders. And then we have, of course, the co-host, Brother Mutota from Trinidad and Tobago. Break time. Stay tuned.
20 years ago, we built a company
Nobody give it to no Guatemala. Come on. This a fi we, with a fear. Nobody give it to no Guatemala. I know we should always help we neighbor, especially in time of a natural disaster. But this is not the case with Guatemala, because the poor people will never see a dollar. Only a few rich man will start to get richer. To the prime minister be happy, like a letter because
Mr. Politician, we got to change your plans.
God have mercy.
Mr. Politician, we got
Back to Sunday Review, where we make sense of the news. It was Brother Akko's suggestion for 2025. We focus on the Caribbean, and nobody else gonna have conversation like this. And I like when I see the screen light up with people from across the region. So we have Sister Penny and Sister Jalima from Belize, Sister Jackie from Barbuda, and Brother Akko from Trinidad and Tobago. For continue the connection from the first segment, we're looking at, and we all identify as African descendants, racialized as Black people, different ages. I know, just like how when I about 5, I know I'm Black and I'm pretty. I know I never want no children, and I know I never want married. Even though I grew up in a household with married parents, and I said married people around. But from a young age, I figure that's not the life what I want. I don't want to be ma, I don't want to be wife, I don't want to be nurse, and I don't want to be teacher. No, I never know where I want to be. But then the thing there, because it never look like it made it work out for that to me. So I never want to be the thing there. And because we not come from families and communities like some traditional African, and I talk before the enslavement of our people, because that I just saw interruption of we glorious stories, where people had traditional ways of defining what a woman is or what a man is, rites of passage, they had cultural values. They don't have that. I mean, some people might tell you, well, they're not Christian and then go with the 10 Commandments. But there's no indigenous African value system for teach we how to value ourselves as Black women, how to be, what the expectation is of a mother. And so in just watching how other women who were biological mothers and who mothered, I feel like I mean a lot of work. I'm not making a life just to be somebody ma or somebody employee or somebody partner. I never had that language, but I had that awareness in me. So because nobody never really did tell you, at the point where I started to have sex and had unprotected sex, then there's a good chance if you have unprotected sex, you won't get pregnant. So a number of times when I got pregnant, well, I know I don't want no baby. So I would have abortions, risking my life, and I mean really that do a number of times. And then I use abortion as a form of birth control for me. So my family, at the point when I got pregnant, I never had them conversations with them. So, but they know I'm active, they not see nothing happen. And so from my conversation, and I never want to be no more. So when they hear I pray and they're like, so what happened? I'm like, I want to keep the baby. Like, because I'm the brother, I'm a conscious Rasta man, and I'm young. I got pregnant at 24, had Menelik at 25. And how different it was, like who you choose to partner with. Again, nobody never teach you that thing. Could change the whole trajectory of your life. And I feel that at the point where I'm there, I made a good choice. And in hindsight, I would still say I make a good choice because he was an outstanding father, still is. And aware of himself as an African being. So I'm want to know from Ono, like what am I for Ono mindset at the point when Ono choose to be mothers, like, because we tend to parent the way we were parented, and we come with a whole lot of trauma from the people that were parented based on authoritative parenting, like Brother Akko said during the break, because of patriarchy. What am I for Ono mindset at the point when Ono start to have children, and in hindsight, at the big age one they know, one could look back and say, man, I never know better. I never know better. Sister Penny, I started you.
I guess age put me in that category, no? To be first.
The whole order, Sister Penny?
I'm 80 years old.
80 and young at heart.
Heading to 81. Mm-hmm. I can identify with a lot of what you said, that nobody, in my experience, sat and discussed that type of decision. I mean, I had great grandparents, I had grandparents. My grandmother had conversation, it was not along those lines, nor my mother, nor my father. And so I decided that my career would be my decision, what I want to do, where, and I had to get help to go where I wanted to go. But for relationships, there was no desire to have a physical relationship with somebody before I got a career. I had to have that under control. I had to have earning power under control. And the thing that to this day amazes me, my mother was a teacher, my father was a corrections officer, and then an entrepreneur. What amazes me, none of them had a conversation, but they had a long-term relationship even before they married. My mother looked at me one day and said, "Marry a man like your father, clear skin and sharp nose." And I thought, what? How on earth? I mean, no wonder you're tolerating behaviors that I would not have tolerated because you settle for less than you're worth. And I felt that if you know what you're worth, then you look for somebody who is at least compatible along the lines you think, or what you want for yourself and your children and career goals. And I made a mistake. I ended relationships because it wasn't going according to my career goals. Because at the beginning of the relationship, I would discuss and we'd agree that this is how we want to go. And then it didn't happen that way. I actually had a spouse who said to me, "Yes, I made that commitment, but I didn't mean it." So I said, "Oh, yeah, oh really? Okay, so back to the career. I married my career." You know? And I raised my children, trying very, very hard to keep them in contact with their father. Because I valued the male role. To this day, I highly value the male role. And then, unfortunately, I recognize that in some of the male experience, they didn't have a role model that taught them appreciation of female or of family or of career and a future. I'll leave it there for right now.
Thanks, Sister Fanny. Sister Jackie?
Like I was saying before, I didn't have it in my head that I was going to have children straight away. And my first daughter came along halfway through university, and I got pregnant through university. But going back to sex education and being talked to about sex, my parents, grandparents, they didn't either. And I contrast that with my youngest daughter. I think she was about 11, and we were driving in the car, and she was telling me about her day at school, because I hadn't had the conversation with her either, based on my background, and she was 11. And she was telling me how at school that they taught them how to put a condom on a penis using a banana. And I was gripping the steering wheel so tight because she was telling me this information in the car. I thought, what? Because I didn't know they were going to have that kind of training. And I calmed down, and then I started to drive properly. But I thought, oh my goodness, at school. And she was so proud of herself because she knew words that I hadn't taught her, and she knew action. And I thought, in the long run, that's a positive thing, but I wish I'd known they were going to do it in the first place. And then I went on and I got pregnant halfway through university, and I was teacher training, and my attitude was, I'm not giving this up, because if I was a man, I'd be able to have what I want to have. So I'm going to go ahead and have my baby and train as well, so I can look for myself and look for my children as and when I need to, in terms of education. So having the sex talk, that didn't happen, but it kind of muddled my way through it. And then my girls I'm proud of them, although when they were teenagers, I used to think, because me and their father were not together, I'm going to send you to your dad. I can't do this anymore. You're going to your father, you know. And then I started to say, it will pass, it will pass. the hormones and all that stuff. And it did. And they've turned out to be two much more headstrong than I ever was. Both of them, and they both speak their mind, which wasn't something that was encouraged in me as a young woman and as a girl, but they do. But one of them, I think because she's a teacher, she don't want children. She says, I'm with them all day long. I'm not coming home to them as well. Whereas the other one, she's in medicine, and she's going to make me a grandma for the first time in September. So I just think, yes. So to me, I've won. I've got the best of both worlds with both of them. Although we still argue, and they treat me like oh, it's just mum, you know. But when I first came away from the UK and came to Barbuda, said I was moving back because my dad wasn't well. They were not happy. They thought I didn't mean it. They thought when my dad passed on, I'd leave. When my dad passed, that's it. Now I'm going back to the UK. I said, no, that's not why I made that change. I wanted to come out of the UK and come back home. And they live with it now. But I'm proud of them, and I'm proud that they've moved on a little bit further from where I was in terms of the mindset of women and mothers and what that means. So that it can mean you can have children or not. It's up to you.
Thanks, Sister Jackie. Sister,
I kind of forget what the actual question was, but it was more or less like what we were thinking when we got pregnant, when we decided to be based on now. And I think it goes back to what your co-host was talking about, because when I first got pregnant, I'm so in love. I'm literally just in love with this man. He could go catch me a fish. He could cook for me. He could do this, right? All of those things. And it didn't last very long. You know, it lasted a few years. We separated. But I think that thinking back on it now, if someone had talked to me a little bit more about it, what he said earlier was that you have to respect somebody first. And I think that if you choose to have a child with someone that respects you, no matter if you decide to, you know, separate or not, I think you will still be able to co-parent and things will still happen, you know, really beautiful for your children. But when I got pregnant, I just thought he was the bee's knees, and I was so in love. I was so happy, and that was my mindset at that time when I started to get pregnant. But you know, he's still around, and he is a good dad. I definitely think my daughter definitely loves her dad. She is much different than me, and I also think mothering and parenting girls are much different than boys, and it has been a little bit of a challenge for me to mother my daughter in certain ways, but I have been trying to learn and be patient. She's just much different than I was at her age, and I'm very proud of her. But yeah, I think looking back, people don't really talk to you about how important you're bringing your DNA together with another person and like creating this human being. And sometimes when you're just in love with somebody so much, you don't really think about, you know, how they were raised, who raised them, where they came from, and certain things like that. And I think looking back, I think I would have wanted to choose someone who respected me, because he was in love too. We were both in love, but love dies. And then where are you left? You know, there's not much like respect. But that's where I was at that point.
thanks, Sister Jalima. Brother Akko, make you get 2 cents.
So I think, yeah. The first thing that I am listening and interpreting how I interpret a lot of what I'm hearing is because we lacked a sense of a cultural framework for discussing things. We never discuss the things that we should discuss. I remember my wife and I ran a school in Trinidad, and I observed the boys. There was a particular parent, younger parent, who used to come very tight dresses and all, you know, what you call bada boom, bada bang. Okay? So one day I noticed the young men looking at her, about 5, and giggling. Obviously, they were looking at, you know, the female form. So I called them and I had a conversation with them with the little I know from what I read about hormones and, you know, the biology and all that kind of stuff and so on. and let them know the degree of control between the difference between control and suppression, and all that kind of stuff. The next day, some parents came to the school. So I was wondering now what was happening, if I had offended, because we are so influenced by this Victorian idea of sexuality and so on that we suppress rather than have open discussion. And to my surprise, they said, we are so thankful that you had the discussion with, because we didn't know how to start it. We didn't know how to start it. The fathers didn't know how to talk to the boys, and the mothers were scared to talk about it to the boys about that. But having myself come from an African perspective, I understood that you had to find a way to discuss this with them. And that's because too many of us lack a cultural framework. So we still talk about the birds and the bees and so on and so forth. And I remember, I was in doing a radio interview in Atlanta where I live. And one of the brothers from the previous program stayed over, and he was telling me, he has these great conversations with his wife and his sons and so on. And they're reading this book called Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. I think that's the name of the book, Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus. And he's telling me all these things that he taught his son about. I said, the most important thing, you didn't teach us that. He said, what's that, brother? I said, you didn't teach him instinct. He said, what is instinct? I said, the same thing a dog has that when he says they just put up his ears. I said, in a society where people have been taught by history to kill you as a young black man, you have to teach him the instinct to know what is wrong, to perceive what moment is wrong, whether he's speaking too loudly in a particular environment. And he said, oh, shucks, I never thought about it. And that's because we lack a cultural framework. So what we do is we take pieces of Eurocentric authors and make up a hodgepodge of things. And that is why in the conversation you and I were having before, Sister YaYa, I'm speaking of we have to return to our pre-colonial heritage, right? That book you are reading, Radiance from the Waters, right? Which explores the whole idea of feminine beauty in Mende culture. And there's another one I have there called Kindezi, the Congo Art of Babysitting, which deals with the whole thing of parenting and how we do this. But because there's a cultural framework, everything can be discussed. Sex, marriage, relationships. And we unfortunately do not have that cultural framework. We have lost it to a large extent. And the last thing I want to say, when Sister Frank, Jacklyn, said about her, we grew up in this era where the girls have to do all the work and the boys sit down and hang out and so on and so on. Well, my grandmother, I guess, was a kind of visionary woman. From the time you were about 8 years, she started to teach you how to cook and to bake. She had a big tray. I decided with my uncles, so all my uncles can cook, right? All 4 of them. And then it started with us. She said, you have to learn to cook. You have to learn to handle certain things. So I am usually in my relationships, I'm the better cook. And I have no problem doing that because the work is divided on who is good at something or better at something. And so she taught us to bake, she taught us to cook and wash. Those days you had what we call a joking board. She taught the color, the shirt, and so on. So I, at a very early age, was immersed in this idea that domestic work was not specifically for women, right? That men must be able to handle their issues. And I think it's because my grandmother had some kind of remnants of a cultural heritage. Because this was not just isolated, because she would take us to these things we call Thanksgivings, where you will be eating in the traditional African forms and so on. So to me, we have to develop and inculcate in our beings an idea of our own heritage and transmit that in terms of motherhood, in terms of how we raise our children, in terms of our relationships and so on. So I think it's very important because what we have are models of patriarchy and models of exploitation and models of capitalism that teaches us only materialistic tendencies. And therefore we have this impulse and this urge to view things through that particular capitalistic and patriarchal culture.
Thanks, brother. I come make ask the other three sisters, is there anything else you want to say based on what I learned on here why I never asked any other segment?
Well, I did pause, but I had some more to say. That because of my luck, I made sure that my sons were not going to grow like that. And even though I was a single parent, I made sure that I found role models in the environment, family and socially, that they would have a conscious idea of what a man ought to be. I took them to retreats, I took them to conferences, so that they could have, and I noticed my younger son, whenever we went to an event, he would always go to the elders, the elder men. And I thought, that's interesting. I made sure right along the way, I taught them to the extent that my younger son cook and press clothes like a professional, like him come from what you call it, cleaner, what you call it again? Where do
Dry cleaner, yeah.
Impressed. I'm so impressed. I mean, he has exceeded any idea. And I said to myself, I can't figure out where he learned that from, because I didn't feel that I consciously taught him that, but he absorbed it somewhere along the way, and I'm so eternally grateful. I remember my older son saying to me in talking about physiology and growth and development, saying to me at age 6 or so in New York, "I know how babies are made." And I said, "Really? Tell me." He said, "There's a seed that goes from the man's penis, goes up into that place where the placenta stays, and the baby grows for 9 months and then is born." And I was like, "Oh, really? Okay, how did you know that?" He said, "Somewhere between your textbooks, the television, and the little girl in my class. Now, my mother wanted to have 1,000 kittens because of the idea of the little girl in class." What kind of conversation today? But that child's parents were expecting another baby. And so they had the conversation with her. And they were able to express themselves and ask questions right along the way. To once, my younger son had pains in his right groin, and I was doing a physical from head to toe. And I said to him, I said, "If you're sexually active, I hope you're wearing condoms." And he said to me, "Do you speak to like this to my older brother?" I said, "Every chance I get. I talk to my pa. I talk to every man." Because, they have a lot of misconceptions out there. So I made it my business to be passionate about making sure that people don't fall prey to the foolishness I fell prey to. And I have a clear conscience that I have seen, and I'm constantly reaping the reward of the role of the man in not only in the household, but overall, the raising boys to be men was a challenge, but it was rewarding. I must say that somewhere along the line, they got the message of what men ought to be and what men could be. And as part of my role now is teaching families that decide to have children about the importance of that man's role. I don't know if Brother Akko, there's a lady in Trinidad that fascinates me. Her name is Deborah Lewis, and she owns a birthing center called Mutota. Have you ever seen her? Okay. Well,
You might there, Brother Akko.
I am familiar with the organization, the name of the person, but I never met her. Yeah.
Awesome, fascinating, and she has done videos. I just scroll all the time looking for new material on the topic of the man's role and the importance of it for the success of wellness. And so I put together PowerPoint presentations and I share it hopefully with men, because there seems to be a lack of sharing along the way. But up to now, I can't find a man who is willing to have the conversation with other men. And I think it's one of our, you've heard of Dr. Herbert Gale, the social anthropologist in Jamaica. He has written books about, and has come to Belize to do research on gangs. And one of the things that's mentioned in that video by Deborah Lewis, and she's talking about the original, at the beginning of life, that man's impact on that child that's about to be born, and how that experience and him being part of that experience will form that future child's attitude to society, to himself or herself. And I cannot understand why in our culture we are not allowing the men, and I see this in hospitals, and I'm not calling names, but it worries me. It really worries me when a doctor can say to a man who is with his woman about to give birth to a baby, this is a woman's department, you shouldn't be in here. What kind of craziness is that? You know? This is a man's seed, and I always say to men who are saying, I don't know baby, my wife have baby. Well, when you put that seed of money in at the bank, that's your wife's money, right? Then your account that. Just like I put a seed in a woman. And if my 6-year-old could figure this out, I can't understand why I can't own it. So anyway, I'm gonna shut up right here because I can go on and on.
Thanks, Sister Penny. Jalima, Sister Jackie, was there anything else you all wanted to say before this segment done?
I mean, no, you touched on, the birthing center, and I don't think any of us really touched on, in the beginning, your co-host touched on, like, parenting and mothering, but I do see a huge lack of, I don't know if it's respect or understanding for women, right? Yes, we can't have children without men, but women bring life into this earth, and most of the times from way back in the day, it was a group of women or midwives who helped that woman bring this child, into the world. And so I just think we have to get back a little bit more to really respecting and appreciating the role that women play in bringing life. I guess not necessarily motherhood, but bringing life into this world. And we had touched on that last time. I don't remember which conversation we had, but my daughter's father was in the room when I gave birth. That was the first time. He had 2 children before me. And he was like, no, I don't know about this. And he was in the room, and he was right there. He caught her. They did the skin-to-skin contact. And I do believe that is also a very important part of having men at least be able to respect that. Because when he came back to the village, he was like, boy, you don't know where I just saw. And I just went through, and I saw my child come out. And so I think he had a different level of understanding. I don't know if it was respect, but I think a different level of understanding after being a part of that process. But I do want to bring back the respect to, the midwives and women that bring motherhood or bring children into this world.
Thanks. We have to go to a break, a 5 minutes past break, but then got one Creole proverb we say, when a woman have baby, you got 1 foot by earth and 1 foot in the grave, because it really is a life-risking moment. Even though a lot of we take it for granted, there's still sisters who are dying in childbirth. Which ought to be preventable, but it still happens. So we're going to take a final break, and then we'll come back and have a last set of reasoning. Stay tuned. This is where we make sense of the news, and it's our Mother's Day Reasoning Edition.
Moms continue to create, build,
Guatemala. I know we should always help our neighbor, especially in time of a natural disaster.
Welcome back to Sunday Review Mother's Day Edition. Reasoning with Sister Penny, Sister Jalima, Sister Jackie, and Brother Ako. I get to one text just now where I value immediate feedback. My sister from Trinidad say, Mother's Day is celebrated as how much you love your mother. This show today is more about the importance of motherhood as a cultural thing. Real good show. Thanks, Sister Fanta. One of the things, and I had heated conversation just now, but anyways, this is one of the things where I always hear. And our perspective on motherhood change as we develop and grow as human beings. So you have this, should I be my child's parent? Should I be my child's friend? And I tell people most of the children brain not fully develop until they're 25. So I want to ask, how because we could be so proud of our children, right? Yeah. But how do you all respond to trauma when it show up in on the children? And know beyond the shadow of a doubt that trauma where you contributed to, whether intentionally or unintentionally. So authoritative parenting, that one of them, do I say I know I do. So I have to be careful because Menelik lives in Belize and a life that for him business, right? But I remember when Menelik was about 10 and that thing haunts me. Well, it happened about 10. I didn't find out until years later when we were moving. I don't know what, and I usually meet at a disciplinarian, a Padawan, just one loving, kind being. I don't know why I do it, because I could guarantee that me do it. But the time when we were moving, we took the curtain off the curtain rod, because we would have moved. And he had written on the curtain rod, in like permanent marker, God, please help me. I'm like, bad word. So we're with the best of intentions. We're creating. We're born with trauma as African descendants, which lies as Black people. We're born with inherited trauma, but then knowingly or unknowingly, we inflict then trauma upon their children, and if they're not healed, then it show up in a day as adults, and we're grandparents, his father and I. It show up. So there's some uncomfortable conversations, but they're conversations that we need to have. So ask we have another like 16 minutes. If you don't want to answer it, because some questions you could say, I don't heal for that yet. I'm not ready for disclose that publicly. Or you could take one pass on it. I only could say anything publicly because I have worked through it myself and come to terms with it and have to live with it when the trauma show up in a minute because it does. So who want a piece of that?
I ready.
Girl, baby, woman.
I totally identify. I made a mess of parenting to the point where my son would write notes and I find the note. And I said, what is this? He said, one of my assignment at school. But the notes kept coming and he said, I'm vexed with you. And this was the way of getting the message across. He said, one of the message said, you must have a terrible childhood to make you the punish me so. And I'm happy that I had the willingness to have them express themselves regardless of what it was, and the amount of time I beg pardon, the amount of time I ask my children to forgive me, and the amount of counseling that we have done individually and collectively because of the trauma. And one of the traumas which I did inflict on my children was moving out of the marital home, not realizing the trauma to the children not having the father there, I could only see one side, and I wanted to do counseling, but this was the response from the spouse was, only weak-minded people need counseling. And there's, when it comes to counseling, a lot of people prefer not to go. They suffer the consequence of their condition, regardless of how suffering the suffering they are going through. They would rather avoid rather than face a situation. So, that's my finding, and I regret it. But I had to teach my children how to live, even though, like what you said, to be able to heal from the traumas intentionally or unintentionally. And I remember having these fixed ideas, and my mother was a real Freudian believer. Mr. Freud, German confused psychologist, and so children were to be seen and not heard. So my son made some appropriate mistakes at school, but me with my know-it-all self punished him, or giving him a consequence. And he challenged me back, and he said, I think you should look at that. And if you get more wrong than right, I will be taking my consequence. But if you find more right than wrong, I think you should reconsider. And I did. I went and I reconsidered, and I apologized, and I said, okay, well, let's see what we can learn from this. And I gave him a little assignment to know the difference between how to spell words. That is how ignorant I was, not realizing that the child wasn't age appropriate to know the difference. He didn't finish there. When we settled on, yes, it's true, you got more right than wrong, so you're not going to get a consequence. He looked at me and said, adults can be right, but children can be right too. That blew my mind. I was so impressed.
And I'm proud at the same time to Sister Penny that you picked that.
And the other thing he did was, when I'm in the kitchen cooking, he's always in there, and I said, come to the kitchen. No, I have to learn to cook to teach my wife.
That's a good one.
I learned my parenting. I'm supposed to be the teacher, but hey, I'm glad I had the chance to have those two children because they taught me a lot.
Thanks, Sister Penny. Sister Jackie and Sister Jalima?
I think when my girls were growing up, I thought I was a good parent, a nice parent, a calm parent, because that's what people said about me. But my children taught me differently, because whenever anything happened at school, initially they would tell me, and I think, no, they can't do that to my children. I'm going in there to sort that school out. And they stopped telling me things. They stopped telling me because they didn't want me to go into school because they were, I don't know, embarrassed or whatever. But I thought I was protecting and helping, and for them I was embarrassing them. And that's shown itself in them in later age, because they fight their own battles more now. Well, we had some battles at home when I thought, I'm the parent, I'm right, you're supposed to listen to me, to the point that it gave me palpitations when the young one didn't listen. And I thought, no, she's going to live with her dad. I can't do this because she's not listening. Because I always listen to my mom. And I just, to an extent, I thought that's what children do. But when they're a teenager, they start to flex, don't they? And try out their wings on life and on you first. And it was hard. It was hard. But I'm glad they've come through. How they've come through. And we still have issues now, because sometimes they won't tell me things, and then I'll find out afterwards, and I'll be hurt and upset. And then they'll say, but Mom, when we tell you this, you do that, and we don't want you to do that. So sometimes it's still hard, and it's not perfect, and it comes from a loving place. So I don't take too much offense. But in terms of that side of things, when I think I'm right, and they need to listen, and they don't, that's always an issue. So, but hey, I'll be a better granny when the baby comes.
Thanks, Sister Jackie. That's a good one. Sister Jalima?
To be honest, with my older children, parenting them, I know I was very harsh. I have not reasoned with them. My son is much easier. He's like, Mom, I hate when you did that, and that time you did that may make this, that, and whatever. And he's able to tell me certain things. My older daughter, we don't speak as much, and we have not had that reasoning. And I know that they don't understand the place that I was coming from, and it probably wasn't the best way to get across, but I was very frustrated a lot, and I did my best with that. I am trying with my younger daughter to be much more patient. But she definitely has the same sentiments that Jackie's daughter has, where I felt away the other day because she had gotten into it with one of her friends, and she didn't tell me about it for like a month or 2 months afterwards. And I said, why did you not tell me about what happened? She goes, because Mom, I dealt with it. And I knew that if I told you, you may go into her ma, you may go into this person, you may go and go rail up, you may go berserk. And it kind of made me sit back and think a little bit because I kind of felt away because when same way in school, when like my older kids were younger, I would go into school, I would rail up, I would get this, I would get vexed. But I think then they kind of stopped talking or telling me things because they didn't want me to do that. And I was only trying to do it to, either protect them or, have their best interests. But my youngest is still 12. And so I think I'm still learning these things. I'm still in the process, and we have not had that many reasonings yet because she's just going into her teenage years, and I'm just getting into that. But I know, being the age that I don't know if it's the age that I am or that I did go through it with her older brother and sister, I'm a lot more patient, and I do try to sit back and think a little bit more before I react.
Respect, but Sister Jalima, you just had an Earth Day car with us some good Taurus women. How old are you now, Sister Jalima?
41.
41. How old are you, Sister Jackie?
63.
63. I like the intergenerational conversation. Brother, I call me good listening, brother. We got for several while we're here so far.
Listen, the part on trauma, to some extent, a lot of us have been guilty of it. I know I myself, because we grew up in a tradition where when a child did something wrong, sometimes you beat the child. But that's what you inherited from parents, right? And all of this had to do with the colonial and slave psychology that we inherited. You have to understand that nothing that we had culturally as African people was retained. So we imitated the behavior of the colonizer. And so we inherited this tradition of beating and this authoritarian method of parenting. Right? And it's something that a lot of us have been guilty of. It's something that we have to change. So even though we don't beat anymore, I certainly wouldn't do that anymore. The point is that even sometimes in terms of how we approach it, it is still, the psychology of it is still there, the domineering attitude. I'll give you an example. My nephew was living with us. We adopted him. And he had capacity, but wouldn't fulfill his capacity. So you talk with him and you talk with him. So we took him to a friend of us who had two very outstanding daughters, graduated top the line in university and so on. And so we were sharing with her, his problem he has, he wouldn't, respond. And you know what her attitude was? Break him. You have to break him. I said to her, you're not a horse. You break horses, And so I realized this is the psychology of parenting. On the surface of children, academically are successful. But I wonder psychologically how wholesome they are. And so that's why I said the cultural framework is something that we have to really seek to develop. There is, I think it's Wordsworth, this famous statement, the child is the father of man. And it has to do with the fact that your childhood shapes who you are as an adult, And so that's the context where we said, look, what you experience as a child, that you become as a man. The child is the father of man. And so these are things we have to deconstruct and to reconstruct an idea of whether it is parenting, relationships, and so on. The other thing we have to, I think, be aware of is that there is something called an inconvenient truth and an uncomfortable reality. And too many times we shy away from the inconvenient truths and the uncomfortable realities. And we have to learn to embrace them, dissect the contradictions, and then reconstruct them in a way that it advances us individually, collectively, in a community. I've said in many instances that we have to understand what is deconstructive theory. That I think, as much as we talk about decolonization and embracing our heritage, we have to understand this sociological term, deconstructing theory. Because even our own selves, we have to deconstruct who we are in the context of how we live and reconstruct a human being that is relevant to the modern times. You know, I read many years ago, I think that when Gugi Wationgo must have wrote it. I'm not, I think it was him. And he made a very important statement about what is called irrelevant traditionalism. And I think it speaks to what Sister Cassasola, Penny was saying about these traditions in which these role models are static, right, and not evolved, right? So you have some Africans on the continent, some people in the Caribbean, who will tell you, well, that's tradition. Well, tradition has to evolve. And this is what is called irrelevant traditionalism. Not before, because you did something 100 years ago, that you have to continue to do the same thing 100 years later. Because it may not be relevant to the realities of the modern era. And therefore, at all times, and that's what I talk about the deconstructing theory, at all times, deconstruction have to do with removing irrelevant traditions, right? And it goes to everything. You know, I make it in a jocular form at times. I said, you know, some people believe that you have to wear a ring in your nose to prove you're African, right? I'm not making anybody a ring in your nose. But if you work in a factory with a lot of robots and you go near with a ring in your nose and one of these machines hook your nose, you might lose your nostril. So that is a tradition you don't necessarily need to engage in a factory environment to prove you're an African. And so it applies in a lot of other areas. So to me, two of the things that we have to understand is the deconstruction of our reality and also the removal of what I call these irrelevant traditionalism. And the last thing I want to comment on is an article I read, I think it was in Life magazine many years ago. And it was the first time, it was, I think, the 100 years of Life. And it was the first time Life did a feature on Africa. And the journalist, the reporter, went to a particular African community on the continent. And they were doing an initiation ceremony, I think of 12 boys. And they had to go into the jungle and perform tasks, and some of it was risky. And one of the boys was blind. And so the journalist asked, well, why are you going to send him in all of this risk with he's blind? And the elder said his blindness must not be a handicap. He has to develop his other senses. And he said, and additionally, when you do an initiation, the group has to take care of him in order to protect him from his shortcomings. But that's a cultural framework so they said his blindness is not a handicap. And the elder said he has to develop his other senses. That's the same thing I told the young man. His son, he has to teach his son how to develop his instincts. You know? And all of these things come from a cultural framework. And I think, you know, when we discuss motherhood, we discuss womanhood as a concept, fatherhood and parenting. We have to return to our cultural concept. A lot we have lost, but we are never too old to learn to pass on to another generation. So my ending message is that, one, we have to deconstruct our reality and reconstruct a new reality. We have to remove irrelevant traditions, and we have to return, as Amilcar Cabral said, to the source of our origins.
Thanks, brother. I can ask the three sisters then before we go. What the one lesson on a land from how on a ma live? Even if I never learn it until after she transitioned, for those whose moms aren't on this realm anymore, what the one lesson we want to find true as women, we want to learn for how on a ma live, and then I could call on a ma name whether I transition or whether I still there. Well, I then I give you 1 minute for think about it. Our mom transitioned. Her name is Jean Marin. And one lesson she teach me when I think I never fully appreciated or recognized it until after she transitioned. Be yourself. 100%. Do it in your best interest. Be yourself all the time. Whatever that is for you as you grow and be, even if it's not popular, be yourself.
I'll go next. My mother is Erlene Cassasola, and she transitioned in 2005. And it was, let no one dictate your choices. That you think out what it is you want to do. Because at 10, I knew. And her coming to me, because she asked me what I wanted to do. And she was talking about a career choice, and I told her, and actually it turns out that what I'm doing now is what I knew I wanted to do at age 10. There were lots of ladders and lattices that I had to go through to reach where I am now. And she said to me, I will get the best for you in life that I can afford. And often we don't pay attention to what our children are saying when they want to make choices. And instead of telling them that we have to decide their choice, I think it's an error. And so I learned to listen to my children and to ask them and to facilitate why they wanted to go, because they do better knowing that.
Thanks, Sister Penny, Sister Jackie, and Sister Jalima.
I think for me, my mom, she never gave up, even when things are hard. You know, in the UK being sort of the minority skin color, being in England, and things are hard, and you were turned away from jobs because of your skin color. She never gave up. She always tried to provide for us as children, doing whatever she could when she could. She persevered. She never gave up.
What was her name? Jackie, what was your mom's name?
Oh, Vermily. She's still living. So, and she's living her best life now. She's cantankerous. She's obstinate. She does what she wants, and she's living her best life now. 87.
Give thanks for her. Give thanks. Sister Jalima?
So my mom is Bonnie, and she is still living right on the street over from me. So I see her often. I learned, I watched my mom make something out of nothing over and over and over in her life, taking something very small or absolutely nothing and making something into it. I also learned to be a caretaker. My mom has been a nurse, a traditional nurse, for a very long time, but I have watched her take care of people in the hospital, outside of the hospital, and everywhere in between. And I think that I have gotten that caretaker aspect from her.
Thanks, Jalima. Brother Ako, call your my name and where she teacher, where hold true, where still apply to your own life today.
I always have to call two women. My grandmother is very important in my life. And her name was Josephine Kojo, born in Grenada, actually. And came to Trinidad and met my grandfather. And my mother's name is Nona. And both of them have demonstrated a tremendous capacity to survive, tremendous sacrifices. I have a tradition of fasting, for example, that every Thursday I fast. And that came from my grandmother, who every Thursday would fast. And so I do that every Thursday to remember. And if I remember one time one of her sons couldn't get a job, and she fasted and walked 12 miles to the church to pray. That's the kind of thing she would do. And so that sense of spirituality and the sense of perseverance, which some of you all alluded to before, and the sense of never giving up, was the thing that I inherited both from my grandmother, and my fighting spirit comes from my mother. My mother is 94 and will fight you today.
Thanks, Brother Akko. And so her brother Akko Granny, ma influenced Brother Akko now. I think they're going on my 6 week. I mean, I always say I want fast, but now I fast from 6 o'clock on Wednesday to 6 o'clock on Thursday. I only have water. Thanks to Brother Akko, a granny, a great granny. This is a Haisa conversation. Big appreciation. I just want to read this finally for show you the difference in a mindset when it comes to mothers. And this particular topic is stretch marks for the people that had them when they choose to have children. And I read this in a book long ago. One story Maya Angelou say happened with them when they got in our African community at the continent. It said, while traveling in Africa, she stayed with a tribe that bathed communally. She said the women began to weep and console her, and she did not know why. They thought she was childless because she had no stretch marks. In their society, marks are a badge of honor. They said even if the baby passed away and she was kidnapped into a new village, if she passed and could not speak for herself, the marks would tell her story and she would get the proper rites at burial. And I think always stayed with me how different their mindset is to stretch marks compared to the Western mindset. So thanks so much, sisters, brother, Sister Jacklyn Frank from Barbuda, Sister Jalima Gold, and Sister Penelope Cassasola from Belize, Brother Mutota from Trinidad and Tobago. We have to thank our security guard, Brother Shane Flowers, our technical director, who's also mom, Krista Flowers, young mom. Kirsty is her daughter. Downstairs at Creme Radio, we have Brother Larry Guerrero, Larry G. The show will repeat at 3:30 Belize time on XTV. You could go to YouTube, XTV Belize, Facebook, XTV Belize, and get the link and share it, because we need more conversations like these. Sisters, continue to enjoy the rest of the day that's recognized as Mother's Day. Brother Akko, big thanks for sharing your last few hours with you. Have with your sweetie. Sister Fanta, thank you for sharing out with me. I love these brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Sister Penny and Sister Jalima and Sister Jacklyn. It's a pleasure meeting you all. Happy Mother's Day.
Always a pleasure.
People are saying the people.
What do you say? Happy Mother's Day. Okay.
Bye.
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 Guatemala, this time we have figure. Nobody do it to no Guatemala. This time me name is Pupa. Belize me come from the Belize City area. 110% Belize and proud of it. Don't tell me about maritime area. Long time ago agreement by the slave master. Talking about the head on the Belize and dollar because patriots.